This picture of Mamedyarov was taken at the closing ceremony of Tata Steel Masters 2022. Mamedyarov had finished as the runner-up, and he was asked at the closing ceremony which was his favorite game of the tournament. And I've written down what Mamedyarov had to say because it was amazing. He replied, "My absolute favorite game from the tournament is my loss against Magnus Carlsen. He played absolutely brilliant. Before the tournament, I thought humans have no chance against engines. But now I think we have some chance because Magnus played a fantastic game. I think in the 27 moves that we played, he made 25 moves, which were the first line of the engine. And one of the moves that was not the top line was E3 in the opening, which was his home preparation. I don't know when was the last time I lost like this. I got absolutely no chance." Now, when Mamedyarov was saying this, Magnus was sitting right in front of him and was smiling, and so were the other players. It is very rare to see such great high words and high praise coming from an opponent for a game that was played. And that's the reason why I've decided to analyze this game in great depth, trying to understand that what made Mamedyarov really, in spite of losing to Magnus, praise him so much and fall in love with this game. So, Magnus Carlsen is playing with the white pieces and opens the game with 1d4. This was played in the ninth round. Mamedyarov goes knight f6. And by the way, both of them were on 5.5 points at this time. So it was the clash of the leaders. Very important game. Knight f3, d5, c4, e6, and now Magnus played g3. Now, whenever Magnus plays the Catalan, everyone's like, okay, Magnus is going to make use of his world championship prep, so let us be a little careful there. But Shakhriyar took the pawn on c4, which is one of the main moves there, bishop g2, and bishop b4 check. This is also very well known. The other possible moves are knight c6, a6, and c5 in the position. Bishop b4, he played bishop d2, and now the main move here is a5. Magnus here thought for 5 minutes 30 seconds. There are two main moves here. One is queen c2 with 898 games and castles with 848 games. So Magnus did go castles. Shakhriyar also castled, and now after 2 minutes and 46 seconds, Magnus played the move e3. Now this move hasn't been played by a 2700 plus player, but Matlakov has played it, Shashi Kiran has played it, and some strong players have gone for it. The main move here is bishop g5, and another way to play is queen c2, and then you take knight takes and b5, a4, and c6. This is another way, and then you play b3. Actually, Nepomniachtchi had once gone e4 against Magnus here. So these are some of the ways in which the play can develop. But e3 was played by Carlsen. And now Mamedyarov, who was surprised here and who said, this is not one of the top moves in the position e3, went rook a6 after 9 minutes 35 seconds here. Magnus now played queen c2, attacking the pawn on c4, b5, and now he played the move a4. Very typical, trying to break this structure. Black said, I'm not going to let it break, I'll play c6, and now white went knight to c3. Very cool move, because if, by the way, this is already a fresh position after rook a6, because rook a6 was played in 2 games. I think Korobov had played it before, but once Magnus played queen c2, we already had a fresh position on the board. b5, a4, c6, knight c3. Now the threat is to take on b5 and take with the knight. And rook b6, defending the pawn. And here Carlsen played e4. Here is where I think Mamedyarov made a small error, according to me. He played the move bishop e7, and this is completely understandable. He is actually trying that after e5, knight d5, knight g5 is not possible because the bishop controls that square. And secondly, he's preparing b4 with the idea of bishop a6. So it's actually a very ambitious move here by Mamedyarov. But we'll see how Magnus takes advantage of it. I think the best move here would have been h6, because you are basically to e5, you are preempting that later the knight will go to g5, so you stop it. Bishop e3 and bishop a6, rook fd1, and the position is quite interesting. I would say that we are playing for everything here. It's a very nice position. Say, for example, instead of bishop e7, if you go knight bd7 in this position, then after e5, knight d5, knight g5, g6, and knight ge4, this is better for white here. And the same holds true for knight a6 if you go instead of knight d7 here, that I go e5, knight g5, and I come back here, and then I'm looking at all these weakened dark squares. So Mamedyarov went bishop e7, and Magnus said, I'll anyway push forward, and he played e5. Now the knight came to d5, and here Magnus could have taken on d5. Now this is where I thought Magnus should have taken, because after, let's say, cd, bishop a5, b4, bishop takes b6, queen takes b6, a5, queen a7, b3, c3, rook fd1, knight c6, rook a2. I was just analyzing this entire line, and I thought that black seems to have decent play here, but it turns out that actually white is doing quite okay, and this is better position for white. I tried for something active here. White is better here, and then after f6 he is clearly winning. So because after take e6 pawn is very weak. Well, the other option here was to take with the e pawn, and then after bishop a5, b4, b3, c3, rook d1, knight a6, knight e1. The advantage is that I can keep this pin for long and reroute this knight. So here white has more advantage than taking with the c pawn. But anyway, Magnus should have done that because he took on b5, and here Mamedyarov had a choice. You know, he took back here cb5, but instead if he had gone knight b4 attacking the queen, this could have led to interesting play. Queen e4, cb, and now there are two ways to play. One is queen g4, trying to keep the pressure on the king, and the other one is rook takes a5, where you recover the pawn. Both lines, I would say, black is doing well, and if Mamedyarov would have done that, maybe his position would have been okay. But he took on b5, and now Magnus took on d5. Clearly you can't take with the queen because white has the very powerful. Try to pause the video and find what's the move here. Yes, knight to g5, threatening a mate on h7 and also the queen on d5. So ed5 was played, and here bishop takes a5. So finally Magnus has won an exchange. Also the pawns are equal, but Mamedyarov was not very much worried because he went knight c6, bishop b6, queen b6, and he thought to himself that, look, I'll put my bishop here, my knight and queen attack d4 weakness, and I'm going to push my pawns on the queen side. So this looks like good compensation for him, for black. But here Magnus starts to play one good move after another. So here first try to figure out what should white play here. A very natural move here is rook d1. You know, you feel like this d4 pawn is weak, let me defend against it, and it's possible to play. Maybe black goes knight a5 to b3, which is a nice idea, or just simply gets b4 in the position. Therefore Magnus went rook to a8. This is a very nice move here improving the rook's position. Now, firstly, you cannot take this pawn because after takes, queen takes, rook d1, queen e5, and here I would like you to pause the video and figure out what should white play. Now, if you were to say bishop takes d5, this is not a good move because black can go bishop g4 and black has excellent play in such positions. Where does the rook go? You know, this is under pressure and queen e1 is threatened. So here after f3, bishop h3, black has good play in the position. So the right move here is to take with the rook, allowing a check, bishop f1, and now bishop h3, you take on f8 and queen e2, and white is an exchange up and should win this game. So you can't take on d4, and an idea like knight a5, which is, you know, to come to b3, now at this point does not work because of rook a1, knight b3, and rook a7, and both my rooks are already in black's camp. So rook a8, Mamedyarov played h6, Magnus doubled, and again the same problem. If you take, nothing much has changed. I'll take on d5 with a better position. So he went bishop to e6. Here, I thought the way in which Magnus played was amazing. Try to pause the video and figure out what would you do here. So now that the d5 pawn is defended, this becomes a real threat. And the most natural way to play here is to take on f8, bishop f8, and then somehow defend your pawn on d4. And you play queen d1. But black then starts to get a play, b4. And a typical idea now is b3, allowing c3. And have a close look at this position. Black is equal here. The reason is that this pawn on d4 is very weak and is attacked twice. And white has to tie up his forces to defend it. If white got an opportunity here, he would love to reroute his knight from e1 to c2. But he does not have the time to do so. So this is equal. Taking on f8 is not good. Imagine that you play queen d2. This is again not the best. b4, and let's say b3. I attack your queen. Queen d1, takes, and bishop f8. And once again, we reach the similar position. Instead of rook here, it is on a8, but the d4 pawn is under tremendous pressure. So, another opportunity here was to play rook 8 a6. But after queen b7, queen d1, this is very close to the game continuation. Somehow Magnus felt it even more accurately than this. He played first queen d1. And he's like, okay, Shak, if you want to take on a8, be my guest. I will take. And once you play bishop f8, I will now switch my queen over to the a file and come in to the position, you know, from a3 or so on. So black said, okay, I don't want to exchange. I'll play b4. And now try to pause the video and figure out what should you do here. b3, very good move by Magnus. First threat is to take on c4, dc4 and d5 when you will lose a piece. So c3 is the most natural move here. Let's say if you play rook a8, bishop f8, we already know that take, and this is winning. So b3, you go c3. And here I want you to once again pause the video and figure out what would you do here as white. Yes, as we've seen in the past few variations, having the queen and knight here is very detrimental to white's position. So the move is rook a6. Kudos if you found this. Pushing the queen away. I mean, he went queen c7, but doesn't matter. And now the final sort of move in the entire position, white to move. What do you do? Knight e1, excellent move. The knight is coming to c2 to defend his pawn, to attack here, to also go to e3 to attack d5. It's very well done. Rook d8 is possible. Knight c2, bishop f5, knight e3. White is better. So he played f6 here. Mamedyarov, as always, trying to go active, but knight d3, great move. If you were to take on d4, then here try to pause and figure out how should white finish it off. Rook e6, well done. Takes bishop, and now e6 is hanging. Knight f4, it's game over. You pin and you win. White is better. So knight d3, he took on e5. Magnus took back, knight e5, and now a very good move. Rook takes e6. Notice if you take here, this is after c2. Black is the one who is putting the pressure. I mean, it's white has lost all his advantage. But Magnus correctly took on e6, and after c2, he played queen e1, and Mamedyarov resigned here because when the knight moves, d5 is hanging, also pressure on e7. Well, let's say a line like knight d3 loses to rook e7, c1 queen, bishop d5 check, rook c1, queen c1, takes, and bishop c4. White is 2 pawns up and is winning the game. So this was the game that Magnus won with absolute accuracy, making no mistakes. All these little ideas of when to play rook a8, when to exchange the rooks, when not to, playing queen d1 at the right time, b3, coming back with his rook, then putting his knight on e1 to go to c2. What high level of play. And I hope you enjoyed this game. It is one of, I guess, the modern classics, and maybe Magnus will have it in his best game collection whenever he publishes that. For now, this is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.